Mr. Kristian Rasmussen, the Deputy Head of Mission of the Embassy of Denmark.
Thank you very much. Esteemed students and United Nations practitioners, fellow diplomatic colleagues, esteemed panel, Secretary General, thank you for inviting us today for this very important opening of what I understand is the 7th Model United Nations here at this school. It's an honor. And I particularly appreciate that we have been granted little areas, topics from which to choose. And I personally have been sort of almost overwhelmed with the range of opportunities available to me. I have been asked in my 5 minutes to speak on juvenile delinquency, crime and violence, child soldiers, youth unemployment, and improved access to education in lesser economically developed countries. I will have a hard time fitting all that into 5 minutes, so I will focus on just one, which is the issue of unemployment, and particularly youth unemployment, which of course is a global problem. It's not only addressed through the United Nations. I would say it's mainly addressed through the individual efforts of nation states, but it is also very important to view the challenge of unemployment, as the Secretary General referred to earlier, as a global one that has to be handled as such. Now, we find ourselves now in a global economic crisis. Ironically, it's an economic crisis that has proportionally hit the most developed countries hardest. Europe and the United States have seen significant declines in growth rates, negative growth in some areas, and other parts of the world are more mildly affected, but it is a crisis, of course, that affects everyone. One of the key components of this crisis is exactly unemployment. It is, as it has historically always been, it is a symptom of the crisis in that reduced economic activity and reduced output results in less employment available, thus unemployment. But it is also working the other way around. It is reinforcing an already existing crisis in that unemployment entails more burdens on the nation states who are already struggling to regain economic growth. So it's a circle, a vicious one. It's damaging to society, but it's even more damaging to the individual who is subject to unemployment. Not just, of course, from an economic perspective, first and foremost, but also in terms of our identity. We are very much defined by our work. I see a group of students, I see some teachers, and I see some diplomats. There was a diplomat from Australia here before, and I'm one from Denmark. That is very much the way we define ourselves. So when you have high unemployment rates, as you have right now in Greece, for instance, it affects also our very self-notion and our identity. The worst kind of unemployment is, of course, youth unemployment. Because in addition to the problems I just described, you have, of course, economic hardship, you have a lack of identity, but you also have, again, what you see now in big parts of Europe, and this country included, you have unemployment for youth that are close to or above 50%, meaning that if you have this for a number of years, you have a whole generation who will potentially lose contact with the labor market, who will never actually be integrated into the labor market. That is an amazingly huge challenge. But that's enough about the challenges and problems. I will also try to outline some of the ideas or the possibilities for addressing youth unemployment. In a global structure like the United Nations, but also based on some experiences from, among other places, my own country, Denmark. We're also struggling with this, but on a lesser scale than other European countries, at least right now. Of course, economy plays a key role. It is the key role in or variable in determining unemployment. But it's not the only factor. There are some other things you can do, bar a total restructuring of the economy. You can emphasize issues like job training, internships, while students are exactly that, students. The experience for a university or even a high school student of being at a company or a government organization for a longer or shorter period of time can be invaluable. Prepares you to understand what is expected at an actual place of employment. I can say that also for myself, because when I was a university student, I spent 6 months as a non-paid trainee at an embassy abroad, and it was not particularly beneficial in the economic sense, but it was in all other senses of the word. And also, I felt that it prepared me for the demands that would be asked of me later on, and also it helped me clarify exactly what I wanted to do after studying. So that's one aspect, which is it's already being utilized, but I think it can to an even larger extent in Denmark and definitely also other countries. Flexible labor regulations is another very important aspect. It is a barrier for especially young ones trying to access the labor market if there is very rigid rules for hiring and firing, so to speak. That is not to say that the labor market should be completely unregulated, there should be no social security, but it is very important to find a balance so that you don't force the employer to be very cautious. And in Denmark, we've worked a bit with that concept and come up with something called flexicurity, which is an attempt at combining the flexibility of the labor market and some element of social security. But if I were to elaborate on that, it would take a lot more than these 5 minutes, which I think I'm already getting close to. Now, education is probably the single one, most important one. And that can seem a bit paradoxical that I will be talking about education at a time where unemployment for graduates also in Greece is close to 50%. But it still is the one thing that students can do to prepare themselves for a time after studying, is to basically excel at what they're doing currently and try to maybe even get a sense of what they want to use the studies for. That, all things considered, that certainly improves the likelihood of not being hit by youth unemployment. Now finally, there's the global awareness, going back to what the Secretary General said and what is trying to be achieved through the United Nations framework, is a general discussion on how do we adjust our national economies in a way that we do not exacerbate the consequences of the crisis. How do we get through difficult economic times while not losing whole generations on the floor? Now that is something that can only be addressed in a global context, and that's why it's very encouraging that you are today dealing with these issues from a youth perspective and under the header of Special Conference on Youth. So I think I'll finish by congratulating you on having chosen this particular topic, and I look very much forward to hearing whatever solutions you will arrive at. Thank you.